All right, everyone, let's continue with lesson 9.3. So example 2 leads us into approximating solutions of a quadratic equation. So here's what that's going to mean. First of all, the beginning looks the same. Solve this equation using square roots. So again, we said that using square roots is synonymous with isolating the variable. That's what we can think of. And then here, this is new. Round the solutions to the nearest hundredth. So before, we never had to round anything. It came out nice and exact. Well, in these problems, they won't. So you're going to need your calculator handy. I'm going to go ahead and solve it like before. I'm going to isolate my variable by adding 13 to both sides. So now I have 4x squared is equal to 28. I'm going to divide both sides by 4 to get that x squared by itself. So x squared equals 7. Now, this is the step where when I go to take my square root, 7 is not a perfect square. So if I pull my calculator out, I'm just going to take the square root of 7. And I know that it could be positive or negative. So rounding that to the nearest hundredth, one answer is going to be 2.65 because that 2.6457, that 5 rounds the 4 up. And then I also have x equals negative 2.65. Those are my two solutions. So not always do numbers work out to be super nice and neat and even. All right, and if you check that on Desmos, you would see that that's where it crosses the graph. All right, let's try the next one. Same deal. Solve using square roots. Round your solutions to the nearest hundredth. 3x squared minus 30 equals 4. I'm going to add 30 to both sides. So 3x squared is equal to 34. Now when I divide by 3, well here, this is the part here that doesn't come out to be nice and neat. I know 33 divided by 3 is 11, but 34 divided by 3 is going to be a little bit bigger. 11.333 repeating. So I'm just going to write 11.33. And now I'll take the square root of both sides. So my square root becomes both positive and negative. Now on my calculator, I still have 11.3. This is minor, but I have all those 3's written in there. So if you can keep the original problem in your process before, like here I rounded it when I wrote it. But if you can avoid rounding within the problem, it's better off. So what I mean is on my calculator screen, my calculator just took the square root of 11.3333, and the 3's continued all the way on to the end of the screen. It's going to be small. It's going to be a minor difference, if any, but it's good practice. And as I said in class, when you get into some higher sciences, you're going to talk about significant digits, and a lot of that will come to play then. So we have two answers, 3.37 and negative 3.37. And just so you believe me, let's try 3x squared. 3x squared, I'll say minus 34. Let's just take a look at that. Okay. So 3x squared minus 34. And our two answers are negative 3.3. They round its nearest thousandth. And there's the positive. Okay, so we can see our answers, like we said, aren't always going to be nice, neat numbers, but that's okay. So if you see something that doesn't work out, don't immediately think you did it wrong. All right, we have 4 word problems we're going to wrap up with then. First 2 are kind of each different, and then the bottom 2 model these top 2. So here we have a touch tank. So you're at the aquarium, you can touch certain fish and aquatic life in there. They're allowed to be touched. They tell us it has a height of 3 feet. Now its length is 3 times its width. So this distance is 3 times as long as that distance going back. We don't know what that is. I'm going to call that W, but that means this would be 3W. Okay, so I have a box, a rectangular box that is 3W. You could have used X or anything you want. 3W by 3 feet high by W feet wide. The volume of this entire thing equals 270 cubic feet, because we could actually get 270 little cubes in here, okay, if we were to 1 by 1 foot cubes. But let's see what we have. So length times width times height equals volume. Now my length is 3W, my width is W, and my height is 3, and that all equals 270. So I can multiply this left side together. 3 times 3 is 9, and W times W is W squared. So I have 9W squared equals 270. Now we're going to solve this using square roots because this is a lot like those ones we just did. There's no W term. So my first step is to divide by 9. So now I have w squared equals, now 27 divided by 9 is 3, so 270 divided by 9 is 30. Okay, I can just go ahead and add that 0 on. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do my last step of taking the square root, and this is not a perfect square. A lot of times in real life, you're not going to get perfect squares, so we're just going to round it. Okay, so I'm going to find, when I take the square root, w equals 5.48, rounded to the nearest decimal. And we also said there's a negative 5.48. Now, in this context, does it make sense to have a negative answer? Can we have a negative length? No. So this one's irrelevant. The only one we're going to go with is that first value. Now, if we just stop there, we haven't fully really answered the question. They want us to go ahead and find the length and width of the tank. So we know that this distance is 3 feet. That was given. We just found W. We said that W equals 5.48. We should round that feet, or label it, not round it. We should label it feet. And then since my length is 3 times that, I'm going to multiply that value by 3, and I get 16.43. And again, feet. Now, how can I check that? Well, I'm going to do 16.43 times 3 times 5.48, or some arrangement of that, and I get approximately 270. You'll see that your answer is going to be a little bit off. Mine is actually 270.1092, and that's just because I had some rounding like we talked about. Okay, you actually, if you did 5.48 times 3, you may have gotten 16.44 here. Again, those little differences, I took the original number and multiplied it by 3, and this is what I got. But if you round it and take this number times 3, you're going to get this value. So either or is sufficient, okay? I would not mark either wrong. All right, so now this next one, the yield sign that we see out on the roads. So the area of an equilateral triangle with a side length S is given by this formula. Not a formula we're familiar with, but this is specifically for an equilateral triangle. They want us to approximate how long the length of the traffic sign is if the area is 390 square inches. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, erase, oh, no, not erasing. Okay, I'll just do that. We're going to go ahead and fill in these values. So for my area, they're giving me what area is 390. It equals the square root of 3 over 4 s squared. I want to isolate my variable, which in this case is s squared. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. I want to get rid of this fraction. This fraction, oops, come on, there we go, is 3 squared of 3 over 4. So I'm going to multiply by 4 over the square root of 3. And here I'm going to multiply by 4 over the square root of 3. Okay, this cancels with that, the 4's cancel, and on the right side I just have s squared, which is what I'd like. Now on the left side, I would recommend doing it like this, especially since we're not in class, it's easier for me to explain it. I would multiply straight across. So I would do 4 times 390, and that's going to give you 1560, 1560, and I'm going to divide that number by the square root of 3. And I get 900.67, rounding it to the nearest tenth, 900.67. Now you also could have gone ahead and done 4 divided by 3 on your calculator, 4 divided by the square root of 3 on your calculator, gotten an answer, and multiplied that by 390, and that would have given you the exact same answer, okay? So how you choose to multiply this here is completely up to you. But now we're at our last step. We're going to take the square root of both sides, and it's not going to be a nice, super neat answer, but it's going to be pretty close to 1, and that is 30.01. 30.01, and this is in inches. So we can approximate that if this is the area, okay, and then each of these sides is about 30.1 inches, which is almost 3 feet, right? 36 inches is 3 feet. If you Google it, I think they are 3 feet, which in geometry, there's a problem about this, and it seems crazy to me that a yield sign is that wide and that large, but it is. So, all right, great work there. Let's try the last two just to reemphasize those concepts. So 5 models that first one. we have a rectangular scenario here. So there is a large storage container in the shape of a rectangular prism, just means it's a box. Okay, I'm not sure of which side is largest or longest, but we do know we have a height of 6 feet. We also know that its length is 2 times its width. So I don't know the width, but I know the length is 2 times that, 2W. And they do tell me the volume is 288. So I'm going to say length times width times height equals volume, or volume equals length times width times height. Length is 2W, width is W, height is 6, and volume is 288. I'm going to simplify the left side and I get 12W squared equals 288. Next step is to divide both sides by 12. I get W squared equals, and 288 divided by 12 gives me 24. Not a perfect square, so whenever I take the square root of it, I'll get a decimal, and that's okay. I'll round it to nearest hundredth, which is, my number is 4. I'll just write it here, 4.8989, doesn't repeat, but this 8 is going to round this number 9 up to a 0, which rounds this up. So I end up getting 4.9. I don't want to go ahead and do the negative because I can't have negative distance. So my answer is twofold. One part is that the width is 4.9 feet. And the other one is that I double that, 4.9 times 2, and I get 9.8 for the length. So 9.8 for the length, 4.9 for the width, 6. If I multiply those together, I end up getting 288.12. We're pretty close, so we did a great job. Make sure you label. All right, the last one here. Surface area of a sphere with a radius of r. So we have a circle. Think of a baseball or a basketball or something along those lines. They tell us that the radius here is going to be r. Now the surface area is that, if we're thinking of a baseball, it's that material that covers the baseball. And this is the formula for it, which you may or may not recognize. Now find the radius of a globe with a surface area of 804 square inches. So if I pull back that formula, we ended on Pi Day celebrating. Here's our pi problem, which we don't do very often. So that's kind of exciting. So I put 804 in for the surface area. I have 4 pi r squared, and they want me to solve for the radius. So this is my unknown that I'm trying to figure out. So I'm going to isolate it, and that's what they want me to figure. First step is to divide by 4. Now, if you want to divide by pi at the same time, you can. I'm not just right now because it involves some calculator. I just want to make sure you do it correctly on your calculator. But, and I'll talk about that in just a quick moment. I get 201 equals pi r squared. Now I'm going to divide by pi. And I'm just going to use the button on my calculator. You could also put in 3.14. Again, that little bit of rounding for our purposes here is not critical. R squared equals then 63.98. And I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. We know that we can get a positive and a negative, but the positive is the only one that makes sense. Now, 63.98 is pretty close to 64, right? The square root of 64 is 8. So it's no surprise that my answer is 7.998, which rounds up to 8. I would label this inches, and that's my answer. I would also here have had a negative 7.998, and again, we said negative doesn't make sense. All right, that's that. Just before I finish up real fast, back to this problem that we're on right now. If you had chosen at this step, you could have done 804 equals 4 pi r squared. You could have divided by 4 pi on the right and 4 pi on the left. The only thing that I want to emphasize is if you do that, put this in parentheses. So on your calculator, when you divide 804 by 4 pi, make sure you put 4 pi in parentheses. So it'll look like 804 on your screen divided by parentheses 4, and you can use the button pi. And you get the same thing, 63.98. Okay? All right, great work, guys. Thanks again. See me and talk with any questions.